Hey fellow law dogs, I'm Max Maseko. As of May 2023, I was a 3L at UGA Law in my second semester in the PAWS clinic. Now, before law school, I worked for 10 years in a position that relied heavily on Excel spreadsheets. Thankfully, spreadsheets, not that important in legal practice.
That is incorrect.
Just kidding. Excel spreadsheets will haunt you in any professional field, law included. If you didn't realize it, spreadsheets very literally run the world. Now, I know what at least a few of you are thinking. Spreadsheets, math. I don't like math. It's the whole reason I came to law school. I'm sure I can get by without knowing Excel. Maybe you can. That attitude is the same attitude a lot of the partners and government attorneys that you'll work for one day had and probably still have. And that is a huge opportunity for you as a law student or a young associate. Because unlike finance or accounting or engineering or whatever other field where your boss knows Excel and you're expected to know Excel, knowing Excel tricks as a lawyer can be a super easy way to impress your boss and might just make you indispensable to them. And making yourself indispensable is a direct path to the big important cases and a consistent stream of billable hours. So today, we're going to review exactly what Excel is, why and when to use Excel, and what tools will help you in practice. I'm going to start with the basics, but we're going to move into some really advanced stuff pretty quickly as we tackle a hypothetical problem that requires some spreadsheet know-how. So today, you can think of me as your Excel Bob Ross.
On this canvas, you're the creator. Anything that you want, you can build here. This is your world. Your dreams come real here.
Pay attention, follow along with me. By the end of this video, you too can be a freak in the sheets. On to question 1. What is an Excel workbook? Well, practically, it's a file containing one or more spreadsheets that can be edited in Microsoft Excel. Each spreadsheet in a workbook is made up of cells. These cells are divided horizontally into columns denoted by letters and vertically by numbered rows. You can navigate the cells by clicking on them or by using the arrows on your keyboard. You can select whole columns or rows by clicking on their letter or their number. And you can select multiple cells, rows, or columns by clicking and dragging across. Or alternatively, to select consecutive cells, rows, or columns, click one you want to select, hold Shift, and click the final one that you want to select. To select non-consecutive cells, rows, or columns, select the one you want to select, hold Control, and select any others while holding Control. Finally, to delete a cell, row, or column, or as I'll show here, some grouping that you've selected, select the group, right-click, hit Delete. It's going to ask you whether you want to shift these cells to the left to replace these, or these cells up to replace those. Oh, and if you mess that up, you don't want to delete the cells, just type Control-Z to undo it. Now, I said a workbook is one or more spreadsheets because when you open a new Excel worksheet, only a single spreadsheet opens by default. But you can add as many different spreadsheets as you want by clicking the plus icon down here. To give your new sheet a name, double-click the current default name to highlight it, and then type away, hitting enter when you're done. As a practical tip, I like to keep sheet names succinct and without spaces. That's because cells in one sheet can reference cell values from another sheet using a formula. This formula includes the sheet name, so keeping the sheet name short makes the formulas a little easier to track. Returning to the question of what is an Excel workbook, well, the technical answer is that it's a file saved with the .xls file extension. Now, if you've ever downloaded spreadsheet data from a website before, you may have noticed that it downloads as like a .txt or CSV file. A TXT file is exactly what it sounds like, a computer file with lines of plain text and nothing else. A CSV file, on the other hand, is a special type of text file where CSV stands for comma-separated values. And back in the day, only CSV data would import directly into Excel seamlessly. But now, not only can you import a completely comma-less TXT file like this Athens bus route list, You can also import things like PDFs. But what if the data you need isn't available in a nice, neat CSV or TXT or PDF file? Well, now it's time for our hypothetical problem. Your boss, partner Misa Lilat, has asked you to create a spreadsheet with a list of all the currently available dogs listed on the Athens Animal Services webpage. So you go to the adoption site and you search frantically for somewhere to download that data, an export button, something like that. But all you got are pictures of cute dogs looking back at you and text data and no export button in sight. So you go back and say, well, sorry, partner Lilat, I can't do what you asked. I would have to type all this by hand. I don't care, partner Lilat screams. Just get it done. Oh, and did I mention you can only bill 1 hour for this? Ouch. This is going to kill your weekend plans, isn't it? Wrong. First of all, you're a young associate. The weekend doesn't exist for you. But second, don't worry. I'll feed you baby birds. You're about to learn a skill that will impress even seasoned Excel veterans. How to do simple macros. I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it. Go ahead and open a new Excel workbook with me. Our first step is to get the data into Excel. Now, sometimes this is easy. One of the imports Excel can do is from web pages directly, if that web page is formatted cleanly. So to do that, we would go up here to this Data tab and then hit From Web. Here I'll enter the Athens Clarke County Adoptable Dogs website URL. Click OK to import it. You'll see that we've only got one thing imported here, which is a whole lot of nothing as far as Excel concerned. I'm sure you're shocked to find that this website is not formatted correctly. So we'll have to do this the hard way. Start by pulling up the Adoptable Dogs page from the Athens Clarke County website. From here on out, try to follow along on your computer. Going through the steps with me should help them stick in your memory better. If you miss something, feel free to pause and rewind. And apologies for those using Excel on Mac, because while the functionality should be the same, certain options may be located in different places, and I can only do Windows right now. Okay, so we've got this website up. We want to capture the data in this scrolly area. So we'll click anywhere inside of that scrolly area and type Control A to select all, Control C to copy. Going back to our Excel workbook, starting up here in this top left cell, paste it with Control V. But oh no, it's just a bunch of cute dogs staring at me. No data in sight. It's stuck behind these pictures. I'm sorry, beautiful, you're heckin' cute, but I have to delete you. These photos are what Excel calls objects. To get rid of them, we'll go up here to Home, and then Find and Select Objects. And now we're able to select objects. What we'll do is, again, Control A to highlight them all, and just hit the Delete key on your keyboard. Now, for one more piece of cleanup, now that this data is viewable, double-click to get back out of the objects. You'll notice that when I scroll over one of the names, I've got this hand icon there. And that's because we've got hyperlinks still in these things. We want to get rid of those. So we'll select all the cells in the sheet by clicking this space in the top left corner in between the A and the 1. Then we'll right-click in any of the area and go to Remove Hyperlinks. Okay, now for step 2, making this data usable. We have the data here, but it's not really in a form we can do anything with. What we want is for these dog names to line up nicely along column A, and then this info here to line up across the rows next to the names. Now, we could do that by just copy pasting cell by cell by cell, but that would be absolutely miserable. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. A slightly quicker way of going about this is to use the transpose option, which will turn these things from vertical to horizontal. So to do that, we'll select 2 cells above our data field here, right-click, hit Insert, then we'll select these cells, Control C to copy them, right-click in A1, paste special, and transpose. And voila, they're sideways like we want them. We would then just delete all these and rinse and repeat for the rest of those. That would be super tedious. But what if we could tell Excel to essentially do all the things I just did with one single button click? Well, people, welcome to macros.
Excellent!
Macros basically take a recording of your actions in Excel and replicate those actions on command. To create a new macro, we go up to this View tab. Don't ask me why it's there, I have no idea. Over to Macros and down. And first thing we want to do is select Use Relative References. We'll talk about what relative versus anchored references are later, but basically this is just telling Excel, do the thing that I just recorded you to do from wherever I'm starting from, not in those exact cells that I did it in. Now, what we want to do is just get this cleaned up to be ready for it, our macro to record. So let's delete these extraneous rows that we just copied out. So now everything is nice and set up. There's one row left in between these dogs, just like there are the rest of the sheet. So we want to start in this cell that says Sandy, or whoever the first dog's name is from this second group. When you do this, we go to Record Macro. Now we want to name our macro so we can tell it apart from any other macros we create. We'll call this one Transpose 3. Here's where you would write a description, but let's be real, no one else in the office is going to know what macros are. You don't need to describe this to anyone else. It's just going to be you. So let's just put a Q in here for our shortcut key. That means that once we record this macro, we can hit Control Q at any time to run it, and that makes it just super easy rather than having to come up and hit like Run Macro up here. Okay, our macro is recording now. So we need to be very careful to do exactly what we want it to do. So first steps are, we're going to add 2 rows above Sandy here so that there's room for these. And then we're just going to copy, paste special, transpose just like we did before. Now we're going to get rid of those extra cells of data, or the extra rows of data, excuse me, delete. And we're going to end on Icaros, or whoever the next dog in the set is, just like before. Now we're going to go back up to our macros and say stop recording. Now before we go test the macro, I'd hit save first. The one annoying thing about macros is that when you run one, you can't just hit Control Z to undo things in Excel like you could any other time, really. So let's save. Error that says you can't do these macro blah blah blah. We're going to hit no, we don't want to leave our macro behind. We have to go select the file type XLSM that allows us to use macros. Now we can run our macro. So let's very slowly hit Control Q to make sure it does what we want it to, and there it did. It put Icaros, Bella, and Beautiful right up above. So we can just keep hitting Control Q slowly to make sure there are no errors in the data field, or no inconsistencies that this is going to do something we don't want it to do and can't undo. If we see that happen, then what we're going to do is just remember where that inconsistency in the data is and go back and fix it before we run this macro again. We'll have to open up that saved document that we did. Luckily for us, I can just go through and do all of these. We don't have any sort of data inconsistency errors, except for this very last one, but that's no big deal. So we'll just click and select, and then you can, any one of these borders, once you have something selected, you'll see the arrow, the cursor changes to this. You can just drag that on over. Now, this is a good time to talk about what happened in these 2 cells. So these are called merged cells. It's just a cell that's been merged all the way across columns E through K. If I want to undo these, what I'll just select them both. We'll go up to Home here, and you see this merge button is selected. We want to unmerge those. Those can be useful, those merge cells, once we come to that glow up stage and make things pretty, and we want to maybe merge some column headers or something. But until we get all our data in where we want it, they're just going to be very much in the way. So now we can go back up to the top, and I want to show you a little navigational feature. If I select a cell without data and I double click the top of it, it'll take me to the very last cell in that row that has no data. If I do that in data, it'll take me to the last cell in the row with data. That's helpful because it shows us, we've got something here that has absolutely no data. And if we keep doing that, we keep clicking up, we'll see we have a few more. So to fill those in, we're going to select the range by, let's go now to the bottom. We'll select this bottom cell in the range, and I just want this column. We'll scroll all the way back up to the top. We'll hold Shift, click, so we've got that all selected. Now we'll go to here to Home, and we'll go to Find and Select, and we're going to go to Replace. We want to replace those empty cells and find what? Empty cells. We don't need to put anything. And we're going to replace those with the text age unknown. And then here, replace all. And boom, 4 replacements. Now we close out of this, double check. Yep, we go. It takes us right back to the top. That's all filled in. So you've got an Excel workbook and you've got usable data in it. We have thoroughly answered question 1. Now for big question 2 of the day. Why do we want an Excel spreadsheet in the first place? Well, the typical answer is to store, analyze, and report large amounts of data. But the real answer is that, but pretty. One reason people like your future boss shy away from Excel is that when you open up an unmanicured document like we just put together, it looks ugly. So as a young associate, just spending a few minutes making the data in that spreadsheet easy to read and visually appealing goes a long way. Now, the beautification of the spreadsheet comes in 2 steps. First, basic self-care. We would just want to do a few things to save us time on the back end and help us not get a migraine just looking at this basic spreadsheet. Step 2 comes after we do all the data input and organization. The glow up. This is where we'll do things like adding borders, making things helpfully colorful, and even adding buttons that can run macros. But we don't want to do that stuff until we've got everything where we want it, or else we'll probably have to redo a bunch of it over and over as we move stuff around. Okay, self-care time. Let's make this stuff more readable. You may have noticed that these column widths have expanded, but we want them to be nice and skinny like they are by default. The reason they got thick is because wrap text up here is selected, which basically says if the data can't fit within one column width, it'll just wrap down to the next line, take up more row room. So we're going to highlight the whole sheet by again clicking up here in this little corner. We'll then click wrap text to make them all wrap text and click once more to make them unwrap text. Okay, well now for column widths, because you see we've got stuff spilling off columns and blah blah, not enough space. To adjust column widths manually, you just click and hold the edge here and drag. That's all fine and dandy, but there's a much easier way. It's just going right here where we are and double click, and that automatically resizes that column. And you can do that all at a time by selecting all those columns that you want and just double clicking the side of any one of them. And now we've got that column width exactly as wide as we need to and no more. You can do the same thing here for rows, but you probably won't do that quite as often. Okay, so we've got this spread out across rows and columns, but we've got inconsistency in font and text size and all. So let's standardize those two. So again, we'll click up here in this corner, and for font, we go just right up here, and the Excel default font is Calibri, which we've already got selected because that was, I think, that font. We'll hit enter to make them all like that. Size 9, bada bing, bada boom. Now, we've also got black text with some slightly gray text, so let's also change all the text to automatic black, and we've got all of that, all consistent across the sheet. Now would be the time to add headers, but we have a problem. We've got these 2 columns that are giving us 2 completely different pieces of information in a single column. We're going to want to split sex and spay-neuter status into 2 separate columns, as well as breed and size info here into 2 more columns. So let's insert 2 columns to the right of each of these columns by selecting 2 columns to the right. So 2 columns to the right of male neutered, insert. 2 columns to the right of mixed breed, insert. And columns will always go to the right of whatever you've got selected. Rows will always insert above whatever you've got selected. So how do we split this into 2 columns? Do we type it all by hand? Thankfully, no. We only need to type the first ones to show Excel what we want to split out. So let's type male and neutered. And now we're going to use flash fill, one of the greatest gifts Excel has ever given us. This is a super basic yet super powerful Excel tool that most people still have no clue about.
Feel the power.
Oh, I could feel it.
To use it, we can go over here to Data, and then this little lightning bolt guy is the flash fill button. Boom. Everything female, male, all the way down. We can do the same thing here, but rather than using the button, we're going to do the even easier version, which is Control E, and we've got it. Now let's just rinse and repeat here. So we type mixed breed. Tab will take you over to the next one to the right rather than enter, which takes you down. And then we've got to type large parentheses over 44 lbs fully grown close parentheses. Now hit enter, and that took me back to that first spot I was working on. Control E, tab, Control E. Voila, we've got all the info we want that easy. Now we can go delete these columns. They're doing absolutely nothing for us anymore. And now is the time to add a header. So let's go over here, right click for insert a new row up top, and then we'll do the headers. So name, ID, animal, sex, S/N, breed, size. You see how it's trying to type small under 24 pounds there? That's because Excel knows that certain things that have already shown up in that column, you might want to type in really quickly fast. I could just hit enter right here and that would be put in, but I want something else. So thanks very much, Excel. I'm going to write size and then age, and it's doing the same thing because we've got age unknown in there, but we just want age. Now we'll highlight this, go to home, we'll center these and bold them just to set them out as headers. All right, this looks great now. We just need to, let's resize our columns, little auto resize. And the last thing we're going to do before we send it off to Partner Lilet is we want to make these panes, this row, always visible along with the dogs' names. We're going to do that by what's called freezing panes. So to freeze both the row and the column at the same time, we need to go to cell B2 to start because it's going to freeze from the top left corner of whatever cell you've selected. We'll go over here to View and then Freeze Panes, and then this top option is the one that allows us to do rows and columns simultaneously. So that, now you can see there's a thin line running across that area, and when we scroll, that's always showing our headings and our dog names. So voila, we've got exactly what partner Misa Lilet asked us for in a nice presentable form. Let's double click the sheet name down here, which I had already changed at some point, but pretend I hadn't. We're going to put ACC Dogs as the title name and send it over to Partner Lilet. All right, so you've sent it over to her. She says, great, thanks. Now it's time for next steps. I need you to edit the spreadsheet to rank the dogs by adoptability. Medium dogs are half as adoptable as small dogs, and large dogs are half as adoptable as medium dogs. The younger the dog, the more adoptable it is. Assume that any dog whose age is unknown is as old as the average dog currently at the shelter. And additionally, please highlight any dogs that aren't spayed or neutered. Yes, people, it's what I'm sure you've been waiting for. It's time for formulas. All right, y'all, we're going to go back to basics for a minute. If you already know all about how cell references and anchoring works, feel free to zone out for this part. For the rest of you, you may not have realized it yet, but the real power of the spreadsheet is each cell's ability to reference and interact with other cells. And it does that through a coordinate system. You know, this is cell A1, this is cell B2, and so on. To reference another cell, let's go over here to I2, and we're going to hit the equal sign. That's the symbol for, hey, Excel, I want to do a formula. To reference, let's say, cell A2, we can either click on it here. You can see that's all highlighted nicely like that. Hit enter. Now what shows up in cell A2 shows up here. Alternatively, we can, again, we'll hit equal sign, and we can just type A2 and hit enter, and it's the same result. The click option is helpful when you've got other sheets. So I'm going to go to create a new sheet down here, and I'm going to hit equals here and go back to my first sheet, and I want name up here. And boom, there I go. You'll notice that the cell reference here now includes the sheet name plus an exclamation point. That exclamation point tells Excel that the cell you want is from a different sheet. We can now click and drag the bottom right of this cell to drag that formula across all the way to cell H. So we've got all our headers just like we did. Now you'll notice they're not in the same format we had them over there. You've got to format them separately. It's just the data that's coming over. Now, why is it that name alone didn't drag across? Why did it move along the whole row of these things? Well, that's because the formula we've got up here is unanchored. That means if we copy and paste, 3 cells over, it's going to move what we're referring to 3 cells over. But if we don't want that to happen, what if you just want to only reference name across here? Well, what you'll have to do is you'll have to anchor this reference. How do we anchor? Well, anchoring uses the power of the almighty $sign.
The almighty dollar!
We put a $sign in front. If we put it in front of the A, that anchors the column. Now if we drag across, we're just going to get name. If we drag down, though, we're still going to get what's below there because we haven't anchored this, the row. So now if we put another one in front of the row, sorry, I should have done that right here, and we drag that down, now we're just going to get name. Every single cell is going to reference exactly A1, no matter where you copy it. But we don't want this anchored. So what we're going to do is we can actually go back up here. Let's select, put our cursor up here. And rather than manually typing the $signs, we can hit F4 to toggle through the anchor options. And let's just toggle them off. Now let's copy back over to cell H. And then let's drag all the way down to cell 90, row 96. So now we've got, row 93. You can take it back while it's still selected. So now we've got all the data from the other sheet in there. And you'll notice if I'm going to scroll back down here, if I go delete something from this other sheet, it's going to delete it there. It's going to show up as a 0 because Excel's saying, hey, there's no data in that cell that you're referencing. What if we don't want this to reference this anymore? What if we want to be able to delete something from here without it giving us that 0? Well, what we're going to do, we're going to select our data, so we'll select all, and we're going to what's called hard code it. We're going to copy, Control C, and then anywhere we're just going to click paste special. And now we're going to select this option, this radio button, values and number formats. So now you'll see that when I select data, it's no longer telling me, hey, it's from other sheet A2 or A1. It's just the data that was in there. And once you've got that data hard coded, you can delete all this stuff and this will stay just like this. We don't need this. I just wanted to show you that for posterity's sake. We're going to now delete this sheet that we don't need anymore. And just this is telling us once you do it, you can never undo it by Control-Z. So don't do it unless you want to. Guys! That was a wake-up call for those of you who had zoned out during the previous segment. We are now going to tackle the adoptability task that partner Lilac gave us. To do that, we need this column to be numbers, not text like it is now, because as smart as Excel is, it can't look at this and say this text that says 5 years and 7 months is 5.583333 years. We have to convert it to numerical form. So to do that, we're going to use our old friend flash fill and find and replace. And this is going to be a little bit of a brain bender on how we do it, because it's not as easy as it could be in theory. So you've got to kind of be creative to work around some of the limitations in Excel. So we're going to put 5 years here, 7 months. And we're going to do flash fill just like we did before. So you may be wondering, why didn't I just put the number 5 there and the number 7 there and flash fill it? Because then we'd be done, right? In a perfect world, yes. But flash fill doesn't know what to do with these single field ones that either just say years or months only. And so it would copy the same number for both, and then when we would try to turn that into like total years, it's going to throw off our calculations. So we've got to flash fill it this way, and then what we'll have to do is first we need to filter out any cells that say months. We need to filter that out from the years column. So these, for instance, we want those to be blank. So we're going to go Control F to bring up find and replace, and we're going to now to target those cells, we're going to put a wildcard, and that's an asterisk here, and that works for multiple characters. So whether this said 7 months or 11 months, it would capture it with this symbol. And then month, I'm not putting months because if any of these say 1 month, I want to capture that one too. And we're going to replace it with a whole lot of nothing and hit replace. So it says we made 7 replacements. You can see where some of those are. They left some S's. So now we're just going to get rid of the S's. We'll put S. We want to match entire cell contents because we want to only capture the cells that say S and nothing else. We don't want to replace the S's from these cells. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, now we've cleared those out. Now we only have the years remaining aside from the word age, from the age unknowns that we did before. Don't worry about those for now. So now we're just going to say the word year, I want it gone. Oh, I got that error because I had this whole thing and it didn't find any cells that said just year. So now let's try that again. Year gone. Now we've just got some S's. Same thing, match entire cell contents. Oh, actually we don't need to do that because we just want all S's gone no matter what's in front. There we go. Okay, so now it's just the numbers. Now we're going to do that same thing for the months column. So Control F again. We have to find those pesky year things that have been slotted in there. Replace all. S to get rid of those S's. Match entire cell contents. Replace all. Now we can get rid of what says month. So we want to get rid of month. Replace all. And any S's.
And it's gone.
All right, so the numbers are in. We've got all the text out of there that we want almost. We just have to do one more thing here. We want to get these age unknowns out of the way so our formulas aren't tripping over those. So we're going to select all in our data. We're going to go to data up here and hit sort. Now what we're trying to do is sort the age unknowns to the bottom. We want to make sure that this box is clicked. If we unclick this, what it's going to do is just sort by column, and functionally what that's going to do is that our nice headers up here are going to get sorted with everything else. We don't want that. We want them nice and neat up top. So click that. We're going to go by this first age one, order A to Z. That's perfect because numbers, you'll see, come before text. And so age unknown down here at the bottom. And I know it's what you've all been waiting for. It is time for some simple math.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm pumped.
Now the first step is going to be converting years to months. So we can go and do this in this column. We're not going to need this column of data anymore. We're going to hit equals to begin our formula. We're then going to open a parentheses. We're going to hit I2 or type I2, either one. Now the asterisk symbol, that's our multiplication symbol in Excel. And we're going to multiply that by 12 to convert years to months. Close that parentheses, plus symbol because we want to add our total months over here. And then click or type J2 and hit enter. All right, we've got our months, but we're going to want to convert that to years. So let's go back and amend this formula by clicking up in the formula bar, back to this beginning, open a new parentheses, surround this whole thing that we just did in parentheses. It's because of order of operations. We want this to multiply and then this to add before we then divide by 12 to convert this back to years. Simple stuff. We're then going to click the bottom, double click the bottom right corner right here to send this all the way to the bottom. And voila, we've got all the numbers that we want. Of course, it has way too many digits on the end, so we're going to go up here to home. And this little back 0 button, decrease decimal, we're just going to hit that until, let's do 2 decimal places. That's fine. Now you'll see that this of course says value. That's because it's trying to multiply text together and it can't do that. So we can just go ahead and select that and hit delete to clear. And that's all the math that you're going to have to do. Excel is going to do all the rest.
A little appreciation. Do you know how easy this is for me?
Next step. Remember partner Lilet told us that for any dogs whose age we didn't know, we wanted to treat them as if they were the average age of the rest of the pups? Well, how do we calculate that average? Thankfully, Excel makes it very easy with a formula function. So to insert a formula function, what we're going to do is hit equal sign, just like any other formula, and then you're going to type the formula function word. In this case, it's just the word average. You'll see that all these other functions pop up in this list that you can use that have average in them. Just FYI, 90-something% of the formulas in here are for hardcore nerd statisticians only. You're not going to use most of them. We're going to go over some important ones today. First one being average. To use any formula, once you've got that magic formula word entered, you're going to open a parentheses. Now what Excel does is tell you, hey, here's exactly what we need to make this function work. Here, that's just number, so on, so on. However many numbers you want. You'll notice here that number 2, this field is bracketed. What that means is that it's not strictly necessary to make this formula work. You can take the average of just one number and it'll work. But obviously we want more than that. We want all these cells averaged. So what we're going to do is type H2. That's the very top one, not including the column header in this column. And then we're going to hit a colon. What that does is tell Excel that we want this whole range that we're about to enter. And then down to H88. And you'll see that now it has selected that entire range for us. You also could have gone up and clicked and dragged, but it's probably easier to just type it if you know what your cell references are. Close parentheses, enter, and we have our average. Now, if we just click and drag this down, what's going to happen? Of course, these cell references we made are relative and not anchored. So it's just going to drag this all down one, which now includes our other average that we did, and the average is getting slightly thrown off. We don't want that. So we're going to go back to this formula that we did, and we're going to absolutize these by clicking up here in the H2 part, hit F4, H88, we're going to click over here, and again hit F4, and that's just all nice and absolutized so that when we click and drag down here, they're all the same correct average. Now, we're going to want to sort these again with these 3.09 averages calculated in there. But we can't do that now because if we do that, these are going to get jumbled into this range and it's going to go haywire. It's going to circularly reference itself trying to take an average of its own average. Not good. We also then are going to want to get rid of these 2 superfluous columns, but our formulas are still applying to those columns over here. So we're just going to take this whole column and hard code it. So select the column, control copy, right click for paste special, values and number formulas, formats. Okay, now you can see these are all hard coded in there. We can delete these 2 columns, select our whole box of data by hitting Control All, and then let's sort these again by age. We want that selected, smallest to largest. Okay, and you can see they are now sorted by age. Okay, next step in creating this adoptability ranking is we've got to make a size quotient that we can use to determine that. Remember that partner Lilet had told us that small dogs are the most adoptable, medium dogs are half as adoptable, and large dogs are as essentially a quarter of as adoptable as a small dog. So to reflect that, we're going to add a column here next to size column by right-clicking in H and hitting Insert. We've got this column that we can use, and we can enter a formula that's going to essentially create that quotient. The formula we're going to use is a very powerful one in Excel. It is the if formula. So to type that, we will equal sign, type if, and then open a parentheses. Now what the if function does is basically says if a logical test is true, so for instance, if cell G2 here reads medium up to 44 pounds fully grown, then produce some value like 0.5. And if that's not true, then produce some other value like 0 or whatever it should be. We'll figure that out in a little bit. So let's create what I just said, that formula. To do that, we're going to say G2, the cell to the left, equals, we want to say if this is something, then yes, value if true. And what we're going to do is type this text. So we've got to open a parentheses to tell Excel, hey, we want to type text here. And you've got to type this text exactly as it shows up in what you want it to compare. So 44 pounds fully grown, close parentheses, and close quote. Now, that's our logical test. We close that off with a comma, and you'll see that this is bold now to show us here's what we're entering, the value if true. So we want that value to be 0.5 because medium dogs are half as adoptable. And if that's false, let's just put 0 for now. We're going to do more with this formula, but we want to see what happens. Boom. Okay, we got our 0.5. If yours says something else, if yours says 0, that means that you didn't type this in exactly as it appeared here. It's kind of annoying to have to do that. So we're going to not do that. We're going to do another function to simplify this. So we're going to hit equals and type if again. And now, rather than saying G2 equals this whole string of text, we're going to nest a function. We're going to put a function inside the if function. We're going to type the word left, which is the left function, open another parentheses. So what it's telling us is that it needs text to look at. The text we want it to look at is G2. We're going to then hit comma and 1. What it's doing is saying that we're just going to look at the leftmost one character in this string of text. We could put 2 or 3 or 4. We don't need to for this. We just want to look and say, is this an M or an L or an S? We'll close that off with another parentheses. We're going to say equals, open quotation mark, M, close quotation mark, comma. Now the value of true, the same thing we did before, 0.5, value of false, 0. Close parentheses, hit enter. Boom. Because this text, its first character starts with the letter M, then our logical test is true and we get a 0.5 value. Okay, so we've created a nested formula that makes this just a little bit easier to work with, but we still need this formula to look at the first letter of this word and return values if it's a large dog or a small dog too. So we need to come back and amend it to make it do that. How we do that is we're going to delete the value if false data here, and we're going to nest yet more formulas. So we're going to do another if formula. We're going to open a parentheses. We're going to again type the word left. We're going to be telling this thing, hey, if, open parentheses, cell G2, the first character, so comma 1, close parentheses, equal sign, just like we did before, quotation mark, L, quotation mark, close parentheses. So again, so if this first thing, if it says, nah, that ain't it, it ain't an M, it ain't going to be a 0.5, well now, the value if false, well, if it says equals L, okay, the value, if that part is true, is going to be a 0.25. And then we're going to do this one more time for the small dogs out there, comma, value if false, another if, open parentheses, left, open parentheses, G2, comma, 1, close parentheses, equals, quotation mark, S, quotation mark. All right, so now if it ain't true that it's M and it ain't true that it's L, is it true that it's S? If so, comma, value if true, 1. And if none of those things are true, comma, 0. We're then going to close this first parentheses. You'll see that it just flashed right here, which shows that it closed. Close this next one, just flashed right here, closed. Close this next one, flashed right here, closed. If you don't put the correct number of parentheses, Excel is going to give you an error and it's going to say, hey, did you mean to close this off this way? Excel may or may not be right, so just try to pay attention to getting the right number of parentheses in there. Hit enter. Let's double click to send that all the way to the bottom, and let's go double check. Are we getting 0.25 for large? Yes, we are. Are we getting 1s for small? Yes, we are. Our formula is ship shape. Let's just give this column heading a heading, size quotient, and then resize it automatically by double clicking. All right, so we've got our size quotient in numbers, we've got our age in numbers. How do we turn this into an adoptability scale, if you will? Now, it doesn't matter what the actual scale of that rating system is. It doesn't matter if the most adoptable dog is a 1 or 100 or whatever. What we do want is for the more adoptable dogs to be the higher numbers. That's just going to be more intuitive for anyone reading that. Now, unfortunately, right now, we've got the size quotient doing that. The more adoptable dogs are larger numbers. But the age, that's not doing that. The youngest dogs are the most adoptable. So how do we turn that the other way around? Well, we can try to rank these dogs by their percentile ranking of their age. So to do that, we'll create a column, age percentage. We're going to enter the formula equals percent rank. And now we're not going to use the just percent rank. You'll see here that little warning symbol, that actually denotes that this is an old, outdated Excel function. We're going to use %rank.exe. So means it's exclusive of the data range that we're about to use. Open parentheses. It's asking for an array. That's our data range that we want to say, hey, these are the things to rank against. So I2, click there, scroll down, hold shift, and click the very last one, I92. Now we're going to want these to be absolutized so that our array doesn't move as we copy and paste these formulas down. So F4, once we've come and clicked up here, and again F4 to do that. Now, comma. Now it wants an X. Well, what's the X? The X is like, what is this thing that we want to calculate the percentile rank of? So here, that's just I2. And we can close this off. We don't need to put significance. That's just asking for amount of significant digits. We don't care. There we go. Okay, copy that down. We still have a problem though. This is the opposite of what we want. This is smaller numbers are still small. How do we make what's showing as the 1 percentile here the 100th percent or the 99th percentile? Well, we just do 1 minus that. And that's a 99, and that's good like that. Now, this is a percentile ranking though, so why don't we make it percentile by choosing percent style right here. Let's center this column, and then the heading we can bold. And there we go. We've got the percentile age ranking there that we can use for an adoptability quotient. So let's make the adoptability quotient over here. Let's type the word adoptability as our header. We'll Control B to bold that. All we need to do here really is equals size quotient times age percentile rank, and that gives us a good number to use. Doesn't really matter again what the scale is. So let's take some digits down, and that's our adoptability scale. Let's again center this. We'll select all of our things to just resize these columns. And finally, let's rank this guy by adoptability. So Control A to select all this, and data, sort, rank by adoptability. Make sure that's clicked, of course it is, and largest to smallest. And we now have our list of the most adoptable dogs, just like partner Lilat asked us for. Okay, but partner Lilat asked us for one more thing, didn't she? She also wanted any dogs that weren't spayed or neutered to be highlighted. How do we go about doing that? Do we have to manually find the ones that aren't spayed and neutered and manually select highlight on each of those? No, of course not. If you're ever manually having to go through and adjust data or formatting in Excel, you're probably doing something wrong. There's always an easier way to do it. In this case, the easier way to do it is called conditional formatting. So we're going to go select one of the cells that we want to be highlighted. We're going to go up to Home and click on Conditional Formatting. We're going to go to New Rule, and this takes us to, hey, how do we want to format this conditionally? Well, if we want to format a cell based on just what's in that cell, it's pretty easy. You just do it one of these rule types. So for instance, format only cell, if the cell value is equal to Billy, we can go to format and set our format that way. We don't want to do that. We need to do something a little bit more complex and have Billy here and ID and dog, etc. be highlighted based on what's next to it in column E. To do that, we use a formula. So we're going to go to the use formula to determine which cells to format, rule type. And we're going to click here in the formula bar. Start with equals, because that's what formulas always start with. And we're going to select E2. Now, we're going to say if E2 equals quotation for text, male, then we want it to format a certain way. But think about this. When we apply this all the way down the sheet, we don't want it to look back at the anchored E2 alone. We don't want Henry to highlight if E2 says male. We only want Billy to highlight if E2 says male. We want Henry to highlight if E3 says male or female. So we've got to unanchor the row number. Hope that makes sense. Format now. We select our formatting and we select yellow. Let's just select yellow to highlight. Hit OK. There we go. Now we notice it's only Billy. So how do we get this all the way across? Well, we go to Manage Rules to edit this one we just created. And this is only applying to A2 right now. We want it to apply to this whole array. So we're just going to go down here. A2 is selected. Let's hold Shift and click that. So now it's got our whole range that we want in there. Click this button to go back, and then we click Apply. Now, okay, let's go back up. All right, so our males are highlighted, but the females are not. So what do we have to do? Conditional formatting, manage rules, duplicate rule right here. And then we can double click this to edit this, and we're going to change male to female. Select OK, select Apply, and they are all highlighted just like she wanted. All right, so we've now got everything that partner Lilat asked us for. It's time to send it over to her, right? Wrong. You're not that associate from Emory who just gets by doing the bare minimum. You're a proud law dog. You're going to be a partner or AOSA or something one day, and you've got to get there by going above and beyond. So it's time to make this ugly duckling of a spreadsheet sparkle with a glow up and make your boss fall in love by giving your spreadsheet functionality she can only dream about.
Swing, swing, swing the spinning step. You wear those shoes and I will wear that dress. Oh, kiss me beneath the mirror.
So let's begin by taking conditional formatting one step further. We talked about how these numbers don't matter. They're just placeholders to give us some way to rank adoptability. And by leaving them as numbers that don't have a whole lot of rhyme or reason to them, we're just inviting the partner to ask us, hey, what is this number? Explain it to me. And that's just going to be a waste of everyone's time. So why don't we transform these numbers into some visually appealing graphic that does the job that these numbers are doing? Let's go up to conditional formatting and turn these into data bars. So let's go to this green data bar. I like this one. And now we want to apply that all the way down. So we just got to manage that rule the same way we did with the other rule. We're going to double click here. First of all, I also don't want the text to show at all. So let's make it show the bar only. Now hit OK. And then we're just going to, we want this to be down to K92. If I type colon, I don't know why it does that, but I can just delete and go to K, absolutize 92. Perfect. And now these yellows spilling in here doesn't look great to me. So I'm going to change these ones to J92 to have them stop a column earlier. Perfect. Okay, now this thing still looks very ugly table-y to me. So let's make it pretty table-y. Let's select all, go up here to format as a table. And you can select really whichever one you want up here. I like these alternating column ones with a different header. So let's do that one. It's going to ask where's the data for our header. We've already got it selected. And of course, we want to make sure that it's showing my table has headers already. We'll click OK. And you'll see what this does is this actually creates the ability to insta-sort A to Z. We can do that for any of the columns here. Let's go back to adoptability, largest to smallest. Beautiful. Now, I still don't like how these headers look. So let's select them and go to Cell Styles and do us a... There, I like that one. That with black text. Perfect. All right, let's again resize our columns. And this, I feel, is a much prettier table. Now, I'm still trying to look at it and say, what else is visually unappealing here? What could be better? This, to me, is a whole lot of text. I don't think we need parenthetical data here. So why don't we just select this column, Control F to bring up our old friend Find and Replace. And I want to just get rid of everything in parentheticals. So we're going to put parenthetical, that wildcard space you learned about, close parenthetical, and replace with a whole lot of nothing. That, to me, looks so much better. Resize that column, and we're cooking with gas. And finally, I want to take these IDs down just one font size. So let me show you a cool keyboard shortcut. If I select this and I want to select all the way to the bottom of this column, but not past the data in this column, I can hold Control Shift and hit the down arrow. And that brings me all the way down here. And we're just going to go and select down font. All right, scroll back to the top. Now for our next magic trick, creating a lookup table. What we want to be able to do is have partner Lilat or whoever else is using this sheet be able to have a field over here where they could just type in one of these dogs' names. So let's type Billy here and have it automatically populate certain data about Billy. So for instance, let's create some headers. Name is going to be the one that the user inputs. We want it to return their ID, their sex and spay-neuter status, their size, their age, and adoptability. To do that, we're going to use one of Excel's lookup functions. Now, if you've ever been deep enough into Excel and you are somewhat familiar with lookup functions, you'll know that VLOOKUP used to be the Excel nerd's bread and butter. But now there's an even more powerful one called XLOOKUP, and that's what we're going to use today. So here's how we use XLOOKUP. We hit =, and type XLOOKUP, open parentheses. Now the lookup value is going to be this user input field, the name. We're going to want this to be anchored here. So we're going to go up and hit F4. Hit comma. Now the lookup array is going to be all these names. But rather than just clicking here and dragging down or selecting that manually, guess what we can do now that we've created this thing as a table? We can just enter the table name. For me, it's table 3. For you, it's probably just table 1. And then open up a bracket. That's going to give us the column. So now we'll just enter name, close bracket. Now comma. Now the return array is what we want this thing to spit out when we type in the name Billy. So since we're in the ID column right here, we want it to spit out table, and then whatever number your table is, probably 1. Open bracket, ID, close bracket, comma. Don't need to do anything for if not found here. We could put 0 for exact match here, although not strictly necessary, and then comma again. Again, don't really need to do this. This just tells it what order to search. We don't care. This isn't a complex enough one. We're going to close the parenthetical. And voila, you can see that Billy's ID shows up there. So now what happens if we drag this over? Well, it gives us NA. Why? Well, because it's dragging both ID and animal. We want this to be name. How are we going to prevent that in the future? Anchoring it. Just kidding. You can't. So there are drawbacks to having the table thing in here rather than doing the actual cell range. But we're going to live with it, and we're just going to now type in sex. And so that we don't have to change both of them every time, let's just copy this whole formula, hit enter. And now in this one, we're just going to copy paste this formula directly into the formula bar. And now we can just erase the sex part to say SN, and that'll get what we want to do. Rinse and repeat here for size. Again for age. Once more for adoptability. Now, you'll notice that adoptability doesn't give us our nice little bar like we have over here. So to fix that, we're going to use the Format Painter, something that you are hopefully familiar with in Microsoft Word as well. I use it all the time there. If you're not using it, you should be using it. So we're going to click on the cell that we want the format to come from, and then go up to the little paintbrush up here, Format Painter. Click that, click where we want it, and that's it. Voila. Now these, we're just going to, let's say, center them. I want 2 digits on this one, just like we had in the column. Okay, so we've built this beautiful lookup table. Now we want to make sure it gets used correctly. Partners, like I said, they're not as in tune with Excel. That's why they're going to be so impressed they're also liable to screw up your hard work. So we want to make it so that only Billy, this cell here, M4, can be typed in. To do that, we're going to create a helpful message by going up here to Data, select Data Validation. Let's put input message here. Show input message when cell is selected, and we're just going to say user input is the title, input dog name here. So anytime that cell's selected, that little helpful pop-up is going to come up. Now the second thing we do is want to protect these formulas from getting messed up. So to do that, we're going to go to Home, and this is all done under Format actually. What we want to do is first, all these cells are actually already considered locked. So we're going to go select the whole sheet like I just did by clicking up in the left corner, go down to Format Cells here, and we want to take these off. Hit OK. Now just for these ones, we want to highlight them. We're going to go up to Format here. We're going to go to Format Cells, and we want them as both locked and hidden. Click OK. Finally, we're going to protect the sheet. That's going to say allow users of this worksheet to select locked and unlocked cells, but not do a whole lot of other things to locked cells. Now, the password to protect this, we can create here. Let's just say PAWS, all uppercase, and hit OK. It immediately asks us for a password to proceed, so just type PAWS again and hit OK. And now you'll see we can put in another dog's name here. The info updates. But if I try to type here, it gives me an error message. And you'll also notice that up here, there's no longer even a formula showing. So not only were you that associate who was prudent enough to protect the sheet from other people's screw-ups, you're also just straight up a magician in the dark arts now, conjuring up magical doggy data without so much as a formula showing. So let's go back and unprotect the sheet so that we can make some more changes. Type in our PAWS password. We want to format this to look nice now. So we're going to add some borders. Borders are over here under the font thing. Let's make this just a nice thick bottom border, and then put a thick border around it, and then square off this section with a thick border so that this one is the input one in blue. And why don't we just shade that one to show, hey, here's where the input goes. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and give our whole table similar borders by selecting this guy, thick outer border. Again, I want these to have that thick bottom border too. Now the very last thing I want to add is just a field that shows when this sheet was created and when it was last updated. So let's go here and just type creation date, bullet last update. Perfect. Now, cool little shortcut formula. To insert the current date, we just hold down Control and hit semicolon. We can do the same thing over here, Control semicolon, and then Tab to go out to the right. And to insert the time, we're going to do Control Shift semicolon. Perfect. Now, let's just make these all look nice like each other. We're going to go to Cell Styles, and we'll do this 20% accent one. Let's make these a little smaller so that they fit in the cell. Now, these look kind of weird with the grid lines there. A lot of people don't like looking at the grid lines, and I'm kind of with you. On a finished sheet, I don't like looking at them either. Now, the way most people go about doing this is by selecting this and just hitting everything white. Don't do that. That's stupid and terrible, and you'll trip over yourself all the time. So Control Z to undo that. The much simpler way of producing the exact same visual effect is going up here to View and just take off grid lines. Everything much cleaner. Now let's do one last column auto adjust. And now we've just got one last thing left in this tutorial. We're going to create some macro buttons. That's right, we're returning to macros. So when we send this over to the partner, what we really want is for this table to match this table. We don't want all this extraneous information in there kind of cluttering the mind of whoever we're sending this to. So there's certain columns like, for instance, animal. They're all dogs. Breed, they're all read mixed breed. These don't give us much information. Likewise, the size quotient and the age percentile were just things that we created for the adoptability ranking here, and they don't mean a whole lot to anyone who's going to read this. So we want to create some macro buttons that will allow us to hide and unhide those columns on demand, should anyone actually want to see our work. So we'll begin by actually recording the macros we want to attach to buttons. To do that, we'll go up here to View. Again, I don't know why macros is up here. And very important first step when we click this macros button, this time we want to turn off use relative references. That's because when we want this thing to hide certain columns, we want it to hide those exact columns, the same ones every time, and not columns relative to where our mouse has selected a cell. So we can start by going to record macro for the first one. We're going to call this one hide columns, and we're not going to give it a shortcut. We don't need it to. It's going to be attached to a button. So hit OK, and remember, we're now recording. So everything we do is going to turn into that macro. So let's select column C, hold Control to select non-consecutive columns, click F, keep holding Control, click H and J. Now we're going to right-click there and click Hide. Now we're just going to go up here and stop macro. So there's our first one. Now let's do a new one. We're going to record macro. We're going to call this unhide columns. And again, no shortcut key necessary. Hit OK. Now we just want to click and drag across here, H through K, and double click to automatically resize our columns. We could alternatively have also right-clicked on one of those columns and hit unhide. It's the same thing. We're going to go up here and stop recording, and now we have our two macros to use with buttons. And before we create buttons to actually attach those macros to, let's just make sure that they work. So go to View Macros, click Run on Hide Columns. Perfect. Now let's go back to View Macros, select Unhide Columns macro, and hit Run. And it does exactly what we want. So now we can create these buttons. So let's go up here where we're going to put it, and we're going to go over to Insert. Let's click on Illustrations. And we're just going to do a basic shape, but you can see that you can use pictures that you download, you can use icons, 3D models, etc. You can have a lot of fun with what you turn into a button or insert into Excel. We're going to click on the Shapes one. Let's go down to Basic Shapes and find this beveled rectangle, which makes a great button. We'll come up here, and we're just going to generally align it with the text and click and drag to create the button. Now this button pops up. We want to make it look nice with the rest of our theme we've got going on. So let's go up to Shape Styles, click down, click this one right here, or whichever one you would like to put. Now we can just type directly into our button for the text. So let's type hide columns. I'm going to double click that text, actually just hit Control A to make sure we got all of it. Go up to Home up here. We want to just format this a little bit to make it look nice and centered in this horizontally and centered vertically. Let's also make it black text so that it matches what we've got up here, and Control B to bold it. Now we can click out of that, just select this button as a whole, and hit Control Copy, Control Paste. That way we make the exact same size button. We don't have to click and drag very precisely. Let's just move it right under this other one. And we'll double click the text in here to change this to unhide columns. And our buttons are built. So now all we've got to do is right click on these buttons. So we'll right click on the top one and go down to Assign Macro and select Hide Columns. That's the macro we want to attach to that button. And we hit OK. Let's do the same thing for this one. Right click, Assign Macro, Unhide Columns, OK. And now our macro buttons should do exactly what we want. So click the center of that one, and our columns are hidden. Click the center of this one, our columns are unhidden. Now the really advanced version would be to actually only have one button here with the button changing text whenever you press it. So if you pressed hide columns, it would change to unhide columns. But that would require knowing the VBA coding language that macros use, and that's a little bit beyond what we're trying to do today. So 2 buttons would be perfectly fine. Your partner's going to be impressed regardless. Click Hide Columns, and we can send it over to partner Lilat, proud of the sheet that we've made.
You did it! Congratulations! World's best.
Excel spreadsheet.
Great job, everybody. It's great to meet you. Hi.
Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you learned a lot. We really only just scratched the surface of Excel's capabilities, and there are so many more cool things you can do to make your spreadsheets look ultra impressive. For more cool Excel tips, I highly recommend following Your Excel Dictionary on Instagram. She regularly posts short, TikTok-style videos showing you how to do all kinds of new Excel tricks. I wish you all the best of luck with your future legal careers, and I hope your new Excel knowledge can help you along the way.